Welcome back. Every September, the Climate Group organizes Climate Week NYC, uniting thousands of people from all backgrounds to address the issue of climate change. With a mission to educate, influence, and inspire, Climate Week NYC drives concrete action into the mainstream. The U.S. lead of Climate Week NYC, Adam Lake, joins me to discuss this movement. Adam, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about Climate Group and just the overall mission of, Climate Week NYC?
Absolutely. So Climate Group, we are a non-profit. We're global. So I'm originally from London. That's where I started at Climate Group, and then I moved to New York last year. We have offices in America, in London, in Europe, and in China and India. And our mission is we want to stop climate change. And we do that through a number of different ways. So we work in areas like renewable electricity, electric vehicles. We're looking at concrete and steel now as well. But one of the biggest things that we're most famous for is Climate Week NYC. It's the largest climate event of its kind in the world. It's going to be having its 16th year this year. And it brings together something like over 600 separate events, probably over 100,000 people during the week in the third week of September. So that's what Climate Group does, and that's what Climate Week NYC is all about.
Now, I think it's so amazing that there's so many areas of, people across the world that are joining and uniting for this one, this one goal. Can you talk about the importance of that? Because I think oftentimes we kind of stay within our communities, which is important to do work within your community, but to kind of come together, I think that has to mean something. So can you tell me a little bit more about that work and what you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I joined Climate Week NYC in 2018, when I became the head of Climate Week, and our strapline that year was for New York, for the world. So we chose to hold Climate Week NYC every year during the UN General Assembly. So that's when the UN hosts all the countries from around the world, because we thought that would be an effective way of doing something when the people in power are there so they can see what we're doing. I think now, as we've grown so big, it's fantastic to see communities from around the world come together in New York City to make sure that we can learn lessons from each other in how we can take climate action in government policy, in business, in our personal lives. And I think that's a really important thing.
And can you talk about the impact that you've probably seen globally because of Climate Week NYC?
One of the questions I get a lot is people say, hey, have you thought about doing a Climate Week in, and then say any other city from around the world? And some other places do it, and they're great, they're fantastic. But my personal experience, there's nowhere like New York City in the world. There's something about how communities get involved in things that they care about that just mean there's so much energy, there's so much growth. We're able to connect people at a community level to people at the most senior levels of government, most senior levels of business, and that's how you make change happen. So I think New York City is special. I think the wider week of over 600 events is something that's so important for Climate Week NYC because it connects people, it allows people to get involved and engaged. So I think that's the impact that we've seen. And one thing I love is when you'll meet someone, maybe I'll be doing an interview on our podcast or something, and they're like a really senior person in a big business supporting their sustainability efforts. And they say, I got started at Climate Week NYC 10 years ago. I just went online and went to this random event, and then I met someone who gave me a job or gave me advice. And it's that thing about every individual can change the world. And I hope that these events that take place, by being open to all, just help people go on that journey a little bit more.
Now, upon doing my research, just to learn a little bit more, I kept seeing the year 2030. So, for those who don't know, can you explain the importance of the year 2030 and why we see it often in regards to discussions on climate change?
So the other year you probably hear a lot about is 2050, because everyone's talking about 2 degrees of heating by 2050. But 2050 is a long way off. It feels a long way off. And if we fixate around 2050, there's going to be no urgency there. And if we want to have any hope of reaching those goals at 2050, we really got to be honest. What do we have to do now? What do we have to do by 2030? So that's why in 2020, we started talking about the climate decade. What do people have to do today? Because if you are a big company that is emitting and saying, oh yeah, we'll be net zero by 2050, what do you really think they're doing today? So this is a great way of focusing the mind. For example, our EV100 campaign, which is when companies commit to having wholly electric vehicle fleets in their organization, we have a target of 50% electric by 2030. So it allows you to track, it allows you to measure, and it allows you to hold people to account. So they're not just saying they're going to do good stuff, they've got to prove it.
That's amazing. I never even thought of it that way. And that's a very clever way to get people to kind of take action, because you are right, 2050 seems like a very long time from now. And I could definitely see how that can kind of make people not put a little bit of urgency or a little pep in their step towards, making change. So 100% I agree with that. Now, can you talk a little bit more about the different opportunities for engagement that Climate Week offers?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, making sure we bring in communities across the 5 boroughs of NYC to be a part of the week is one of the things that is most important to us. So one of the things that we do to try and help with that, if someone wants to host an event, they can apply to become part of the official agenda for Climate Week NYC. So it goes on the website, it goes on the searchable calendar, which goes live in a couple of weeks' time. And that's how you get an audience of like hundreds of thousands of people finding out what to do. So if you're a company and you're looking to host some sort of event, we charge a small fee because we're a non-profit, so we need someone to sort of allow us to do all these things. If you're a community group, if you're a small non-profit, if you're doing something at your school, there's no charge whatsoever. Let us find out about your event. We want to promote it. We want to provide you with an audience. Naturally, the majority of events happen in Manhattan because that's where the majority of things often do happen. But we want to change that, and I want to see more events this year in the Bronx specifically. Go on the website and register, and you know what? This is all about supporting different communities to be part of the week itself. So if people got questions or they're like, is this an event? Is this something that's going to work? Ask us. The contact details are on the website. We want to support and make sure there's more, just more of the Bronx at Climate Week NYC.
That's amazing. And I will say that, just doing this work, I've learned that the Bronx, many people from the Bronx are, environmental justice a big issue here, and so I think it would be very important for the people of the Bronx to know, how they're being affected by this, and that they too can make a change, and also encourage other people to make a change. So I think that's amazing, and I love that you pointed that out. Now I want to talk about the prominent figures attached to Climate Week NYC. I understand that Jane Fonda and the Apple CEO Jim Cook were in attendance for the previous Climate Week events. Can you just talk about the significance of having, people with extremely large platforms attend and be a part of this?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, because I think when you work in that world, you do end up meeting lots of people who are very, very famous. You kind of like become anesthetized to it, especially during the week where there might be world leaders on stage and you're backstage and you're thinking, oh wow, there's Matt Damon, or there's Jeff Bezos, and so yes, it is important and it is helpful when you have people with a large platform, because it involves a wider audience. I think the biggest audience we ever got, we collaborated, we worked with a brilliant guy called Steve Bordeaux who worked on The Tonight Show with Trevor Noah, and he helped us bring in all the late night TV shows to do a night devoted to Climate Week NYC. It was called Climate Night. So we had Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, even James Corden, I think it's back in England now. But that got a huge audience and the whole world spoke about it. These things are great for bringing people in, but, and there's a big but, we don't do this job for social media likes. People knowing about you means nothing if we're not reaching our climate targets. So it's really important that when you're working with celebrities, prominent people, or even prominent politicians, you've got to root it to action. Like, what's the actual thing you're trying to do? And showcasing or raising awareness of a specific issue, like you mentioned, environmental justice. Like, if there is an area in New York City that has suffered from environmental injustice, and raising awareness can help make a difference, then that is a completely valid thing. But there are whole other areas where it's really important that you have to make sure you're rooting it to some form of change.
I agree, and I think it's important, like, people are aware, but what are the next steps, right? So I think it's important to not just stop there, but you are correct. It's important, and I think it can open so many doors to people who probably didn't think about it before. If they thought they were just going to see like a funny celebrity interview and then they're learning about climate change, it could really change things. But you're absolutely correct. It definitely takes more than that. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about how do you educate the public, the general public, about climate change in a way that encourages people to actually take action and think critically about the world around them?
I think sometimes it's less about educating the public and more about allowing the public to educate the people in power. So I think, we will work with lots of CEOs who are trying to do good things on climate. But one of the things about Climate Week NYC I love is that there are people on the ground here who know about climate change because they're living in it. Like, it is a really hot week this week. We're fortunate to be in a room with air conditioning, but we're outside, we're melting. Now, a lot of people, if you do certain jobs outside, you work in agriculture, or you work in construction, or maybe you don't even have a home. Like, these audiences understand right now what's happening, what the impacts of climate change are. And so I think we talked earlier about 2030, 2050. I actually think raising awareness of those stories about the impacts of today, air quality, asthma rates in certain areas. Now, there's a lot of environmental injustice around that. Look at asthma rates in different communities. Making sure that message is taken to political leaders and business leaders. I think that's a big part of the education that needs to happen.
Now, I want to say that 2030 sounds far away, but it's closer than we think. What do you hope to see in the near future, just in regards to how we address climate change and the things that we do to kind of address the issues attached to climate change?
I think change is the one word answer for that. I think we're in a really interesting place as a global society, because when it comes to taking that climate action, actually, a lot of world leaders do support what we want to do. A lot of business leaders support what we want to do, and definitely the community supports that. So we've got a lot of stuff on our side. The issue is we've got to get stuff done. And so I think when we're looking at transitional vehicles, how we get our energy and our power, all these different things, I think we want to see those changes like in the flesh. We want to recognize this is different. There's a great, there's going to be a change in New York later this year where hydroelectric power is going to come in. It's going to take out something like 80% of emissions from a gas-fired power station. It's things like that. Real stuff. That's what we want to see.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and educating. And as you said, learning a little bit, about what's going on with Climate Week NYC. So once again, thank you.
You're welcome.
To learn more about the upcoming Climate Week NYC event, please go to the website at climateweeknyc.org. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you miss any part of today's show, you can catch a recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hymie on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.